Hey, welcome back, students. Today we're going to take a look at integers using a vertical number line and this marvelous helium balloon model. Here you can see the red helium balloon, and it is filled with, yep, you guessed it, helium. That gas that is lighter than air. That's why helium balloons float. And then there's a string tied to the balloon, and at the bottom of the string is a cup, and that cup is filled with weights. Maybe they're little pebbles. I don't know. I can't really tell from here. But anyway, let's talk about the helium and the weights. Now, everybody knows, or at least you should by now in 7th grade, you should know that helium is what, the more helium you put in, the more the balloon goes up. So helium makes the balloon go up. Balloon go up, right? Of course. So if it is increasing the height or the elevation of the balloon, that must mean that helium, in this case, is going to represent positive integers because they make the balloon go up. Positive integers. Okay? And the weights, of course, what do the weights do? The more weight you add, the weights make the balloon go down. And that makes sense, right? So if helium makes the balloon go up, and that's a positive, if the weights make the balloon go down, then that means that the weights are going to represent the negative numbers, negative integers. Negative. Okay, so let's think about our model. In the area of positives, let's change colors here. In the area of positives, what would happen if we were to add more helium to our balloon? Well, hopefully you just said that that would make the balloon go up. You add helium, the balloon goes up. Okay, so if helium represents positives, that means that if you add positive integers to the number that you already have, the value that you have increases. That makes sense. When you add positives, the value increases. So for example, if this balloon is sitting at an elevation of 0, and you add 4 units of helium, then the balloon should go up 4 units. That makes sense. But what if the balloon is sitting at -2? Let's say it's 2 units below, like say the table it's sitting on. It's floating, the cup is sitting at -2, but you add more helium. Let's say you add 5 units of helium. Well, if it's sitting at -2, it's going to go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And where is that? Well, that's at 3. So that makes sense. When you add positives, the value increases. Okay, well, what happens then? What happens if we remove helium? What if helium is taken out of the balloon? What happens? That's right, the balloon goes down. Because there's less gas in the balloon, so it's going to go down. So what's another way to think about removing? When we remove something, what are we doing? Yeah, that means we are subtracting. So removing helium is the same thing as subtracting positive numbers. So if you subtract positive, what happens? Does your value increase? No, the value is going to decrease. The value will decrease. For example, if the balloon is floating at 6 units above the table, and you take away 3 units of helium, so we're sitting at 6, you take away 3, 1, 2, 3, then you're down to 3 units above the table or wherever it was sitting. What if the balloon is sitting at 1 unit above the table and we remove 4 units of helium? So it's sitting at 1 and we remove 4 units. Well, that would go 1, 2, 3, 4. That would go down 4. That's down to -3. Better still, what if it is 2 units below the table? 2 units below the table, and I take away 2 units of helium. So I'm sitting at 2 below the table, and I take 2 more away. 1, 2. Well, now I'm down at -4. So that's what happens when we add helium or remove helium. When you add a positive, the value increases. When you subtract a positive, the value decreases. Okay, well, that's all great and wonderful, but let's talk about what happens when we add or subtract weights. And this is going to take some serious thinking on your part, so hang on tight. Really pay attention here now. Now let's talk about weights. What happens if we add weight to our cup? If we put more rocks or whatever is in that cup. When we add weights, what's going to happen to our little balloon thing here? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down if you add weights? Well, hopefully you said it's going to go down. It should, because you're adding weight, and weight causes balloons and things like that to go down. So when you add weights, the balloon goes down. Now remember, weights represent negative integers. So that means that when we add negatives, when we add negative numbers, the value goes down, or the value decreases. That means it's going to travel farther down the number line. Decreases. Okay? For example, if, let's say the balloon is floating at 6, and we add 2 weights. That means we are adding -2. What happens to our balloon? Well, if it's sitting at 6 and we add 2 weights, it's going to go down 2 units. 1, 2 units, and we're sitting at 4. So 6 plus -2 is 4. Okay? What happens if we're sitting at, like, say, I don't know, 2 units above the table, and we add -5 units? We add 5 weights. So we're sitting at 2, and we add 5 weights. We're adding 5 negatives. Well, it's going to go down, right? Because we're adding negatives, we're adding weights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it goes down to -3. So 2 plus -5 is -3. Now what if, let's say that the balloon, the little cup there, everything is floating at 3 units below the table. And let's say we're going to add 4 weights. So we're going to add 4 negatives to that. -3 plus -4. So it's sitting at -3. And it goes down 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I ran off my number line. Well, that's going to go down to -7. So remember, every time you add negatives, the value decreases. You're going down the number line. Okay? Well, let's talk about when we remove weights now. When we remove weights, when we take weights out of the cup, what happens when we remove weight? What happens to the balloon? When you start taking weights out, will the balloon go up or will the balloon go down? If you take weights away. Well, if you remove the weights, that means that everything's lighter, so the balloon should go up. Right? If you remove weight, the balloon goes up. So that's the same thing as if we're removing weights. Removing means subtracting. And weights represent negative numbers. So when we subtract negatives, that means that the value, it doesn't go up, right? Or, it doesn't go down. The value increases. So when we take weights away, when we take negatives away, when we subtract negatives, the value increases. So let's say, for example, that our balloon is sitting at 3 units above the table. And we're going to take away 3 weights, 3 negatives. Now it's going to go up. Did I say 3? I meant 2. Sorry. Sitting at 3 units, and we subtract 2 negatives. That means it's going to go up 2. So if we're sitting at 3, and we take away 2 negatives, that means it's going to go up 2 to 5. Okay? Because we've taken away negatives, it's going to go up. Now let's see. Let's say that it's sitting at -1. Let's say it's floating at just below the table at -1. And we are going to take away 5 negatives. So we're going to take away 5 negatives. That means it's going to go up 5 units. So sitting at -1, it's going to go up 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right up to +4. And lastly, let's try one more. Let's say it's sitting really far below the table, sitting 6 units below the table, and I'm going to take away 3 weights. I'm going to subtract 3 negatives. So I'm sitting at -6. I'm going to take away 3 negatives. That means it's going to go, because I'm taking away 3 weights, that means it's going to go up 3. That's going to go up 1, 2, 3, up to -3. So hopefully this gives you a good practical guide that you can see what it means to add and subtract positives and negatives. The hardest part for most people is to understand adding and subtracting the negatives. When you add more negatives, your value goes down. When you subtract negatives, your value goes up or increases. Take the time to continue to practice adding, subtracting integers. It's really going to pay off in the long run. Have a great day. Don't forget to be awesome, and I'll see you next time.